So, yeah, good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome. And I welcome everyone on behalf of Pmo Insights, on behalf of Pmo India community for this wonderful evening and for the wonderful session. And we have everyone from the Pmo India community team. And, and with the zero delay, we'll kickstart and we will kickstart the session. And I request Karthik and Gaurav to take over the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Ram.
Yeah, thanks. Gaurav, you want to go ahead? And if you could move to the next slide, the one after this, please.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Ram. I just wanted to give a couple of key things which we did before, or rather from 8th of May to till today. And we would like to introduce our new volunteers first, whom we have onboarded while we had been going through this fantastic journey. Ram, can you? Yeah, thank you so much. So we have quite few volunteers whom we have onboarded, and Isha Babbar, Padmalata Turaga, Stephanie Kunur, and Yuvraj Mirashi are volunteering for projects and alliance portfolio. For engagement portfolio, we have Mahesh Evi, Neerav Kosar, Ramesh Vellore, and KN. And for our operations portfolio, we have Yashita. So warm welcome, volunteers, and thank you so much for getting on this journey with us. Run the next slide, please. All right. And another key event which is coming up starting mid-October is our Pmo India Awards. And basically, at the global level, we have Pmo Global Awards, which is a flagship event of Pmo Global Alliance. And we have thought of starting the India Awards from this year. And that's where we are going on this journey to celebrate the PMOs and PMO professionals in India. Why we have Pmo Awards is basically we thought we want to bring in next slide, please. We wanted to bring in the global flagship event regionally. And another reason is this project would increase a lot of more traction for the India Hub and the PMO GA community, the global community as such. Another thing we thought was to create more awareness among Indian corporates and engage them. And basically, we also wanted to launch this so that we could engage more and more PMO professionals, businesses, and functional heads on this journey, on the awards journey per se. Now, with this awards, we have 3 categories going on. The first one is PMO of the Year. The PMO of the Year award is basically for the companies to get their nomination. The second category is the Newcomer Pmo of the Year. And we have introduced this category as a pilot this time in India Awards so that we can look for going forward in the global awards too. And the last one is the PMO Leader of the Year. That is for an individual PMO leader. Now, from the PMO of the Year and the PMO Leader of the Year, the winners would be directly nominated in the global awards. So they would be representing India at the global podium. So I would like to welcome, and I would like to also urge all the PMOs and PMO professionals in India to nominate their own selves in this awards and celebrate the value they are bringing into their organizations and share with our community. I would hand it over to Karthik. Karthik, over to you.
Sure. So the other, thanks, Gaurav. So the other thing that, the other update that seems to be happening now is our partnerships with some of the other forums. We reached an agreement with PM World Journal, which is an online journal and comes out with various publications, articles, research publications as well, and we've tied up with them, and so this is open to any of our members and anyone that is interested for us to collaborate and wants to publish. From the PMOGA India Hub perspective, we publish a monthly report to the PM World Journal, and which is available, which gives us, we are able to share with the larger world the updates that we have in terms of the hub. The other partnership that we are doing, as some of you may have seen, is with PMO leader led by Joe Pos and others, other leaders. We have multiple areas where we are looking to collaborate with PMO leader, and this is in discussion and has pretty much got confirmed, and you will hear more details around this in the coming weeks. Finally, we also, we're also kind of leveraging our connect with PM Magazine Net, who, Gaurav, if you can move to the next slide, who helped, promote the Pmo India Awards as well on their website and on their platform. And this is, if you can see, it's along with the Pmo Global Awards, which is part of the Bridge PM and PMO conference. We are also represented here. So we are beginning to kind of, slowly but surely engage with some of these, and our intent is to work with more and more partners that will make us more visible, where on the one side, but also will help us exchange much more. And clearly we look and hope that that will be with IPMA as well, with Dr. Pace being here today, that in future we find mechanisms of collaboration. I think those were the updates overall from a India Hub perspective. Ram, over to you.
Thank you, Karthik and Gaurav. That was really wonderful. Thank you for sharing the details. Okay, so now we'll carry on. We'll move forward for the session, and I really welcome Mr. Dr. Michael Face on behalf of PMO GA India community, and very happy to have his presence for the PMO Insight event for the month of October on the top where he'll be sharing and discussing on Pmo Maturity Model. And Dr. Michael is very much customer focused management expert and problem solver who has delivered complex and large scale projects using a best fit approach like plan driven, change driven, etc. And he has also been recognized as a significant contributor and a concept person behind major project who has implemented robust strategies that has drove company growth and responsibility. He's also very much passionate about the communication at all levels, and I have enjoyed the opportunity to speak in multiple countries on several continents, including today. And also published several books and a book chapter, and written multiple articles and presentations on project management, customer analysis, communication principles, and strategy as well. So I really am happy to welcome, and we all thank you, Dr. Michael Face, for for accepting the invite and sharing your thoughts on Pmo Maturity Model. Thank you.
Over to you, Dr. Pace. I believe you can start sharing your screen.
Yeah. Yes, you can just.
Right. Well, good morning, everyone, or I should say good evening. It is slightly early here in Texas, but I am absolutely thrilled to be here to talk to you all today about PMO maturity and just share some thoughts based on a blending of academic research with anecdotal evidence, with what's going on within reality. So a little bit about me. Now, here in Texas, we have a thing about trying to be humble and not braggadocious. And so I'm always hesitant to share too much about my experience because I don't want to sound very arrogant. But I think it's important that everyone understand, why should we spend any amount of time listening to this one random guy speak about anything? And so I guess technically I'm considered a project management expert, but I will put expert in quotes every single time. I don't want to be an expert in anything. And I actually really prefer this Zen Buddhist concept called Shoshin, where you put on a beginner's mindset. I am absolutely thrilled to be the idiot in the room wherever possible, and I don't really want to be the expert. But that said, I've got about 20 years of experience in project, program, portfolio, PMO experience, fixing and building PMOs in a couple of different organizations. After about 15 years of working through the PMO experience, I decided to go back to school and get my PhD in business, specializing in project management. And I became a professor because I have worked with a lot of organizations and worked with a lot of dysfunctional project management offices that we can do better. It is all about, hey, we don't have to continue doing the same things. We can teach the next generation to be better than we are. And so I'm a consultant, a teacher, a trainer, all in how do we improve and how can we be better at this? So today, what I thought we would talk about in the short time we have together is a little bit of some foundational, boring stuff about PMOs and maturity, longevity, life cycle, just so that we're speaking the same language. And then a little bit about complexity and talk about systems and emergent behavior, and then really get to the meat and potatoes of how can we extend PMO maturity and longevity, and what are the drivers of change that we can look at. So just a little bit about PMO foundational knowledge, and again, it's really important that for my purposes, really, that as we start talking about that, we're all at least in the same book, if not on the same page. And so hopefully this isn't too boring. I think we're all pretty familiar with the traditional 5-scale or 5-level scale of PMO, PM, PF, maturity. The same model is used repeatedly, that we start off in an ad hoc setting where we're just kind of making it up. Here in the States, I call it duct tape and chicken wire, where you're really just hoping for the best. And I like to say hope is a really bad strategy. But as you improve in that maturity, you go through an abbreviated stage of we know what we're supposed to do. We may or may not be able to do it. We consistently do it. We're doing it across the entire organization. And then we finally get to the continuous improvement stage where we're benchmarking against previous experience plus benchmarking against our competitors, so that we're in this Kaizen state, this constant positive improvement. The important thing to think about from PMO maturity and looking at this model is that over time, we're supposed to get better. However, that's not always the case. So as we get better, we have increased performance. And so increased performance and increased maturity go hand in hand. You just have to worry about the time aspect of that. And that is the core challenge for us for when we start looking at PMO maturity. Now, I'm sure we're all familiar with the traditional company, organization, product life cycle. It's the same life cycle across the board, that we can talk about something is introduced, we go through a growth stage, we mature, and then we eventually decline. Now, it doesn't matter if we're talking projects or products or PMOs. This happens over and over again, where we introduce something and over time that grows. As we look at PMOs specifically, the average growth, maturation, and decline is 2 to 4 years. And I thought, well, that's got to be wrong. That can't possibly that can't possibly be the case. Maybe I'm looking at a bad study. And so I started looking, and I found year after year after year of actual empirical research looking at hundreds, if not thousands, of actual PMOs that are out there that continually show us that PMOs last for about 2 to 4 years. Some go a lot longer, but on average, 2 to 4 years. And so the question in front of us is, how can we hit this inflection point and jump the curve? How can we go from a maturation stage and then extend our product or PMO life cycle and not go into decline, but rather figure out how to continually grow? And over time, that 2 to 4 years goes away, and instead we have this constantly changing, constantly evolving PMO. Part of the problem in front of us has to do with this idea of complexity. Now, when I mention complexity, what normally happens is we think about complicated versus complex. So just a small little bit of definition. When we say complexity here, we're not talking that it's hard to understand. I can look at my car. Actually, I drive a motorcycle. So if I look at my motorcycle, I can say it is really complicated. I don't know what this thing does or that thing does. But if I take it to a mechanic's office, that mechanic knows exactly where everything goes and how everything works. So it's complicated, but once you get training and once you get involved with it, it's easy enough to understand. The idea about complexity, rather, is that it is an interconnection of interdependencies that are difficult to predict. That's in physics and in academic settings, what we'll say is it's nonlinear, difficult or even impossible to predict what's going to happen. Now, one of the major things that we look for with complexity is what's called emergent behavior, that we start to see patterns emerge over time. And in a large part, these patterns appear without leadership or out without direction. They just kind of emerge. And so we can't understand what's going on at a base level, but we do look for these emergent patterns. And finally, with complexity comes chaotic or stochastic, where we look for these tiny small changes that can create very large changes overall. Now, when we look at it, I really prefer thinking about it as a system. Now, a system is just a series of inputs that go through a process that result in an output. And if we look at PMBOK, for example, I'm sure everyone is very familiar with the idea that PMBOK has inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs. And we've all had to memorize those for the PMP exam, and then we immediately forget them as soon as we are done with the PMP exam. So from a systems thinking, we can say that there is a specific system that might be relevant for PMOs, and that is complex adaptive systems. And with a complex adaptive system, what we see is at the base level, agents start interacting with each other, and those agents actually start interacting with the broader environment. And through these interactions, what occurs is learning and evolution and change and growth, and that feeds back in on itself, so that we are constantly changing, constantly adapting. And we can't necessarily predict what's happening at the individual agent level, but again, we start looking for the emergence of behavior that is creates a pattern. So I mentioned earlier, I drive a motorcycle. And so as I'm driving to campus each day, I can't really predict what any individual car is going to do. I don't know which student is going to do something silly, but if we think about traffic as a system, we can't predict what's going on at the individual level. What we start to see an emergence of patterns, so that when there's a red light, we can expect a backup of cars, or when there's a police officer ahead that's doing a speed check, we can expect a slowdown. And so we may not see the police officer for quite a while, but we can expect that because this pattern starts emerging. And so when we have Texas A&M is really big on American football. And so American football, they have to tailgate, and then they have the game. So if there's a home football game here, we can't really predict the individual person, but we can predict heavy congestion of traffic and slowdowns. And so that's really important here for our project management office, that we can start predicting things that emerge kind of unexpectedly. Now, that's really what's going on here, that there's this constant interaction which relates and feeds into these overall system-wide patterns. And then those patterns in turn influence future interactions. And so what's this matter? Well, it matters because we're going to start looking for the inflection point. How can we extend the maturity of our PMO? How can we make it last longer so that we can do better? And it's an absolute horrible answer, but the answer is it depends. And it depends because of all of the complexity inherent in how the PMO gets set up, all of the complexity inherent with the interactions. And so we have to ask a few questions about how we got here. So we'll start with some basic context that becomes important. PMO typology is the first thing that we'll need to worry about, of what is the type of PMO that we have and how was it created. Now, traditionally, there's three types of PMOs: a supportive, a controlling, and a directive. where the supportive PMO kind of gives you templates and best practices. The controlling tells you exactly how to do it. The directive, where you would actually be managing projects. This is the model that I've studied for years, that you really have these three types. Different researchers say that no, there's actually a lot more types of PMOs, that you could have this entire enterprise PMO or just a division, and it can go down all the way to project management center of excellence, which is essentially just a group of people trying to do better. You have very little responsibility, authority, or accountability. And so I mentioned all of that to say, well, when we say look for that inflection point, the type of PMO we have matters. Are we an enterprise PMO that's highly directive, or are we a PM center of excellence that's highly supportive? That's going to kind of add some context to try to create this amount of change for us. A little bit on creation itself of the PMO. We as project managers or PMO directors have very little, if any, control over this, but we should continue to think about two key things. One is the PMO should always be an independent business unit. The PMO standing alone by itself allows almost like an internal audit function, where you don't have to get mired in the politics, because the job of the PMO is to bring people together. And so if it is an independent business unit, it does better. It also does better if you have executive support. And so when we start looking at that 2 to 4 years, well, if the executive goes away and a new one comes in that's not a champion, that's going to create some problems and some challenges for us. So again, not totally in our control, but we should look for ways to influence that if at all possible. So let's go searching for this inflection point then, and let's talk a little bit about change. The reality is that PMOs will change over time. They need to change. And so this 2 to 4 years, it's fine that we keep this in the back of our heads. I would rather think that every 2 to 4 years, we're going to evolve. We're going to change, and we're not going to just die, but our PMO needs to evolve to a future state. When we think about that, there are things that are going to make it go faster. There are things that are going to impact the context of it. And then there's going to be a few things that we can say that's really going to drive it, that's really going to create that inflection point. So let's think a little bit about the conditions around our PMO changing, because what we want to have happen is that change means we stick around longer, which allows us to mature, which allows us to do better. Well, we can look at things that just happen, some events that are not necessarily totally in our control, but we can take advantage of. Like a new PMO manager comes in, the former manager is promoted or goes to a new job. So you have this new leadership come in, and that's an opportunity that you can take advantage of, jumping the curve and growing to new heights, creating a new vision or strategy, either at the PMO level or even at the company level. Any kind of competition that comes up, competition is great when you handle it correctly, because you try to be better. If we look at workload, asking the PMO to do more could lead to change. Whether that's positive or negative depends on the workload itself. There's a lot of external factors. And again, this top management support comes in, that change in a top management is going to create this condition where the PMO is going to change one way or another. We also have issues that could create this change. The level of accountability the PMO has for projects matters. Our cost, including the ROI of the PMO, are we saving money and being more efficient, all of that. The PM maturity, are we doing better as a project management function? In addition to trying to mature our PMO practices, are our PM practices maturing as well? The overall work climate, we've got project performance, business performance. Are we standardizing how we're doing things? Are we focusing on portfolio management and collaboration? How well we do each of these individual things within the scope of work of the PMO influences this or creates this condition that leads to change. Looking at the context itself, the size of the organization, the PM maturity of the organization, and how they manage change organizational wide are all going to be very, very important to us to take note of as we try to create this sense of change. Interesting enough, if we change the role of the PMO itself, if we try to either move to the supportive or the controlling roles. So earlier we said it could be supportive, controlling, or directive. So if we try to shift to either supportive or controlling, that's going to start changing and creating this inflection point that we need. So out of all of these things going on, what are the things that can help us jump to a positive? Well, the number one driver for change on the positive side is doing better in project management. So if our PMO is actively delivering projects, if our PMO is helping those who are delivering projects do those projects better, PM performance is the number one positive driver for PMO positive change. On the negative side of things, the number one negative for us is top management change. So if a top manager comes in, CEO, COO, whoever's in charge of the PMO, if that person decides that the PMO is no longer needed or isn't earning its paycheck, then that's going to create a negative sense of change. And I can tell you, for example, some anecdotal evidence from just my experience that these are absolutely true, that I've worked in an organization where the CIO resigned and a new CIO came in. And the PMO was growing and maturing. And it was right around that 2.5-year mark when the CIO switchover came. And the chief information officer, the new one, said, "I don't believe in project management." In which case, there's very little that the PMO director can do if the CIO says, "I don't believe in project management." And it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. She dissolved the PMO, spread out project managers and let them do things, but there was no standardization. And as a result, projects started to fail. And so this PM performance issue was related to that. It just disappeared. But from a other side of things, I have been in PMOs where we're doing rockstar work. They're dependent on us. We're delivering multi-million-dollar initiatives, and they say, do more, do more, do more. And so as you do better, you're given more work because they want that to continue. Now, these are just two of multiple lists of things. How the PMO responds to external events, risk management, issue management, that kind of thing, that can be a very positive driver for change, of creating that positive inflection point. As I mentioned, that new PMO manager is a great opportunity to say, new ideas, fresh blood that comes in and helps us create that inflection point to keep moving forward. If we have a history of solving tension and or conflict, that's a great positive driver for change that actually leads back into organizational support for the PMO. And people want the PMO to continue to exist and to continue to do better because it helps solve problems. I mentioned earlier that if we shift supportive or controlling roles, well, if we shift to the supportive role, that's a positive driver. Not necessarily only supportive. I would argue that you have to have some element of directive and some element of controlling. But if you also help others that are not in the PMO continue to do better with their work, that can be a positive driver. You're building that support, building that external environment up to help keep the PMO going. And then finally, the history of business performance. I think it's ironic that within I'm president of IPMA, and we use different baselines and standards than the PMBOK. And one of the reasons I went from PMI to IPMA is I look at things like benefits realization, and it's a program management or a portfolio management thing instead of at the base level of a project management. And I get stuck both from a consulting perspective and history of, when you deliver a project, did it deliver the thing that you said it was supposed to? When we did, I led a giant project several years ago of a boxing match versus Floyd Mayweather Jr. versus Manny Pacquiao. And so I was working for this giant telecommunications company, and we're trying to prepare for this boxing match. And it resulted in $56 million of profit. And it's that kind of, did we achieve the business result that we were supposed to achieve that keeps it going and positive? I can, same organization, tell you about a different project where all they wanted to do was modify the website. And the website was clunky. It was not responsive to mobile devices. It lost customers along the customer journey. And over the course of 2 years, the PMO came and went to try to help this marketing team deliver a website. And the marketing team decided they didn't need the PMO to help them anymore and they would do it themselves. And they spent millions of dollars to fix a website that never went live. They could never figure out what they were trying to do and what they were trying to solve. They kept making these incremental changes, but it never resulted in more customers, more revenue, keeping people through the customer journey. And that is important because if you're not delivering the benefit of the project, it doesn't matter about on scope, on time, on budget. If you're not delivering the purpose of the project, the PMO is not going to be around very long. Now, on the negative side of things, of the drivers that create negative change, well, creating any type of competition around projects. So who's going to do it? Is it our PMO versus their PMO? I mentioned the marketing team wanted to do it, and we were actually the product management team trying to help them. Well, when we created a sense of competition, that made things worse. So when we stepped out of the way and the marketing team went forward with it, it didn't result in success, but it eliminated that competition. And so competition within the company itself for projects is a negative. You need to solve problems, not create them. We need to solve tension and resolve conflict, not necessarily enhance those. Also, across the board, a negative is poor change management. Now, projects are change agents. They will constantly create change. And how we can help an organization deal with that change, regardless of any of the change management frameworks you prefer. I personally prefer Lewin's model because it's only 3 things. You unfreeze, you enact the change, and then you refreeze. And so there's this preparation of getting people ready for the change. You tell them what the change is going to be. You do the change that you're supposed to, and then you have a period of stability to get people prepared for the next change, to get them bought into what they just started doing, and to create some element of support. Well, that's simplistic enough, but if projects forget the idea that humans are going to be impacted by this and humans cannot handle change, we want status quo. If we're bad at that, that's a negative for us, and that's going to decrease our longevity. So to kind of give us some key takeaways here, if you don't remember anything else from the last 25-ish minutes, I hope you remember these 3 things. That we trying to increase PMO maturity, trying to increase the longevity, trying to get our PMO to last longer, because we can do better the longer we last, we have to create change readiness. We should support it. We should champion it. We should be the experts in change management. And if we can do that, it's going to help a whole lot of factors that will continue to help us grow and mature. We should also really intensely focus on project management maturity across the board, whether it's our own processes and projects, whether it's those that we're helping with, regardless of if we're a supportive, controlling, or directive PMO, we should deliver successful projects, programs, portfolios. We should, at some level, be supportive of people outside our organization. So we're going to run projects. We're going to help you run projects, and there's no competition there. And if we focus on very clear roles and responsibilities to solve tension, resolve conflict, that helps us in the long run. And then finally, there's a saying of, figure out what you can control and deal with the things that you can't. Well, the PMO situation itself, there are some things that we just cannot control. Overall governance, overall support, and sponsorship. We want to increase it as much as we can, but we do have to admit sometimes when it's just not possible, it's outside of our control, and we have to do the best we can with the 2 other things here that we do control. Just a little bit of self-serving advertisement here. I do have a consulting company, and it's all based on assessing where you are today, figuring out where you want to be next, and how do you figure out how do you get there. And so if anyone is interested in connecting, I would absolutely love to chat with y'all more. some information here to connect. There's my email address if anybody should want to connect, and there's a QR code that links over to my LinkedIn page. I'm absolutely thrilled that y'all were able to attend this evening, and I would look forward to connecting with each of y'all. Now, Gaurav and Kartik, I think I am just slightly early, but you know, every good project manager knows that you should be early instead of late. And so I am absolutely thrilled if there's any questions that I could help handle, or any kind of discussion outside of the main presentation here.
Fantastic, Dr. Pace. I think that's the beauty of a wonderful project manager. So I think that's the direction which you give to the general people how to manage the project. So yeah, definitely we have set of question and answers. So I would like Mani to share the questions which we received in the chat box. So over to you, Mani.
Hi, Dr. Pace. Okay, thank you for the presentations. It was very insightful. Okay, let me just go straight to the questions. There are 3 questions was asked in the chat. This one we will go through one by one. Okay, the first question is how to manage the fluctuation in Pmo maturity inflection point. Okay,
how to handle the fluctuation in Pmo maturity inflection point.
Yeah.
Well, it depends, right? That's the hard answer. If I'm understanding the question correctly, what I would say is focus on what you're good at and be really good at it. And that will create that inflection point that allows you to continue jumping the curve, be able to change and adapt as situations change for you. And again, be cognizant at least of what you can't control. Do the best you can with what you have though. And when you do it awesome.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Dr. Okay. Second question is what models or tools for Pmo maturity assessment do you use or have you used in your organization?
There's a couple of major Pmo maturity models, and they're all pretty much the same. So I don't know if it matters if it's there's one out of California. The Kirshner has a model. The CMMI has a model. So these same models continue over and over. To be honest, when I go in to assess an organization, I use what's called a grounded theory approach. Grounded theory is an academic paradigm where you don't necessarily have a hypothesis that you're trying to prove or disprove. Normally in science, you go in and say, okay, gravity is a thing, and so the apple will fall, and if it falls, great, gravity is a thing. So you have this hypothesis that sits out there. With grounded theory, instead of having that question as you walk in, you try to let the facts speak for themselves. And so I mentioned that because when I go into a Pmo to assess, I look at it and say, great, I consulted for a bank this summer, and I said, great, I'm going to talk to the executive in charge of the Pmo, and I'm going to get his feedback. And then I went down 4 levels of the organization and did interviews to say what's going on, what are the problems, how do we communicate? And this grounded theory approach kind of let me hear the data and then come up with a theme at the back end, where the Pmo was actually pretty mature. It was probably a 2 or a 3 on the scale, to be honest, that they have a very consistent approach that they use over and over and over again. But outside of the Pmo, both horizontally and vertically within the organization, it disappears pretty quickly. It dissipates. And so it was an interesting, it's an interesting challenge. And so because of the different complexities, and we go back to complex adaptive systems, I really prefer this grounded theory approach and say, look, here's the model that we're going to find, but there's not like a checklist I can give you because each organization is different.
All right, thank you, Dr. Pace. The final question is quite a long question. While CIO and COO may impact the existence of Pmo, the business unit heads are often not receptive to the service or do not believe in it, even though the top boss may. So in principle, we have the PMO, but very slow in making inroads. How we can address this?
Yeah, excellent question there. If I had to do over again, I would get a PhD in psychology, because projects, PMOs, programs, everything would be easy if we didn't have to deal with other people. It's the people that make this really challenging. Now, there is a neuroscientist named Dave Rock, back in 2008, comes up with this model called SCARF. And he says the underlying theory of this model is that your brain will react to some interesting things in the social domain the same way they would in a physical domain. So there's a tiger over in the jungle and you see this flash of orange and you have to trigger this fight, flight, or freeze response. Well, the same thing happens in your brain when you feel targeted or attacked or threatened, as far as your sense of status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And I say all of that. So that was a long question, and here's a long answer to get to. When you have unit heads in the business who are feeling that the PMO doesn't matter, I wonder, hey, am I triggering their sense of status, that it's creating this fight or flight response without me knowing it, that they think if the PMO gets credit for it, that it's a zero-sum game. So if the PMO gets credit, they're not getting credit and they don't look good. In which case, I could go in and say, look, I don't need the credit. The PMO is going to help you and you're going to get all the credit and everything will be fine. I can point out specifically, this happened to me. It was Dish. I worked for Dish Network, and I had a unit head who refused to show up to any of our calls or any of our meetings. And she said, I'm not interested, until the point when the $56 million became a thing. And then all of a sudden she wanted to be interested. And so I mention that because if we can figure out how to make that unit head status seem more important, or at least not feel like they're threatened, or they're going to look bad or anything like that, that might help create some inroads with that unit head. Again, eliminate sense of competition. We're trying to support them. We're trying all to do better. It's a little bit of kumbaya and I try to get along, but if we can do this little bit of psychological manipulation in a positive way, it might help us in the long run, help that PMO mature and hopefully diminish that negative reception of these unit heads who don't like us.
Thank you. All right, one final question, but long, but there's a multiple question in one single question. Okay. All right. It's common to find proposals which suggest that becoming more and more strategic is the answer for PMO maturity evaluation. How do we see that? Could we say that strategic PMOs are more matured than the operational PMO? And are PM organizational maturity and PMO maturity connected in some way?
All right, lots of great questions. I'll answer the easy one first. PMO maturity and PM maturity are absolutely connected. That if the PMO is creating more mature PM and vice versa, there's a correlation there. I won't say causation or anything like that, but there's absolutely a correlation that a PMO, as it matures, the PM practices should mature as well. So there's a link there. As far as a strategic PMO being more mature than an operational PMO, we would hope so. But I've known some strategic PMOs that have no idea what they're doing. That we want them to do good. since we're recording it, I'm hesitant to like name names here, but I know someone within the last couple of years who they were launching this major ERP system across a huge number of stakeholders. We're talking hundreds of thousands of individual employees, and it's a new HR system and it's a new payroll system and all of these things. And they had the press release ready to go that said, oh my God, we did such a great job. They wrote that press release 6 weeks before the launch of the big product. And it was 18 months afterwards that they were hiring people because the project was so bad. It was so poorly implemented. And this is a strategic PMO that kind of got ahead of themselves, really, that they thought they knew what they're doing. That kind of goes back to the absolute first thing I said. I don't ever want to be the expert, because when you become the expert, you zero in on that one solution that you think is right. And so I think that saying a strategic PMO is more mature, we want it to be, but it may or may not be. Now, I think there was one more question there about becoming more strategic. And I would argue that adding strategy to a PMO. So instead of saying it's a strategic PMO or it's an enterprise PMO, but instead focusing on just strategy, thinking about the future and where we're headed and how things connect. I think that is absolutely a benefit to a PMO. I would argue that becoming a strategic PMO in that you handle every single project isn't necessary. But I think a PMO needs to know what strategy is and how to enact it. I think I covered all of those, Mani. Did I get them all? That?
Yeah, of course.
All right.
You covered all the questions. Thank you, Doctor. Over to you, Gaurav.
Thank you, Dr. Pace and Mani, and thanks for taking up these questions. And I believe the participants must have enjoyed the answers as well as your insights. So we'll move on with the next part, which is our feedback for the session. So I would request the participants to just type in menti.com and use this code. I can just type in on the chat window also. Great feedback coming up. Awesome, insightful, brilliant. Thank you, everyone. So I think we can move on. So with the next part of our session today. That is our speaker of the month. So thank you, Dr. Pace. We would like to applaud and appreciate your contribution towards Pmo Global Alliance India Community Hub. And this is our small token of appreciation for your time and your sharing the knowledge. Thank you, Dr. Pace.
Thank you all.
And we'll move on with the next award, which is the Volunteer of the Month. So Dr. Pace, we give this award to the most engaged volunteer because everyone is volunteer in our community. And we thank for the special contribution and the initiatives which have been taken up by volunteers to grow the community and to make everyone grow, right? So that's the beauty. And for this month, we would like to thank Gaurang Vora, who is our Director Projects and Alliances, who has been instrumental in launching the Pmo India Awards along with his team, Isha Babbar, Padmalata Turga, Stephanie, and Yuvraj Mirashi. So thank you so much, Gaurang and team, for launching Pmo India Awards. So just a quick details about the core PMOGA India Hub team. So Karthik is the India ambassador, and you have already met me. So Gaurang is our Director Projects and Alliances. Minaketan is Director Engagement. Ram is Director Growth. Avinash is Director Marketing and Growth. Asif is again Director Projects, and Mani is taking care of the operations. So this is our core team along with set of volunteers. So with that, I would like to thank everyone for this participation in this insightful event. And thank you, Dr. Pace, for sparing your time and giving us your valuable knowledge. And I can really understand the idea behind contextual PMOs as well as the inflection point you just mentioned. So it's all about how you can change the existing mindset as well as bring more maturity to the existing level of PMOs. And with the involvement of strategic or directive or operational PMO, it matters most the context in which we are implementing some project management practices. So before ending, I would like Americo to say a few words if he's still there. Americo, are you there? I think Americo is on mute.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay.
I was trying to turn on the microphone. Hello,
Sure.
Michael, thank you very much. It was a great presentation, great insights. Thank you very much for your collaboration, and congratulations to our volunteers, all of you that made this moment, this fantastic moment possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Americo. And thanks, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Pace, once again, and wish you a happy Sunday. And with that, we'll come to an end to this session for October, and looking forward to more collaboration with IPMA and you, Dr. Pace. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Garo. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good night.
everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
You all.
Thank you.